So picture this. It's 1991 in Japan. There's this huge explosion of spiritual searching happening. And in the middle of all this, a speaker gets up and tries to answer a massive question. With literally thousands of beliefs all competing for your attention, how on earth can you tell which one is actually true? He didn't just have an opinion, he proposed a specific three-part framework to figure it out.
And to really get a feel for the era we're talking about, just look at this number. By the middle of 1991, 1.14 million. That was the membership of just one new religious group, the one founded by the speaker himself. And that number, it's a perfect snapshot of what was being called the third religious boom, a time when millions of people were desperately looking for answers.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll dive into the context of this religious boom. Then we'll look at the huge problem it created. After that, we'll get to the core solution, the three proofs, and see how the speaker used it as a kind of litmus test. And finally, we'll explore what it all means for a person's individual journey.
Okay, so first things first, we really need to understand the vibe in early 1990s Japan. We're not talking about a casual interest in horoscopes here. This was a deep, society-wide shift in thinking.
Yeah, the speaker points out this incredible shift. Just a few years earlier, maybe 20 to 30% of people in Japan said they believed in an afterlife. But by 1991, that number had shot up to nearly 60%. That kind of change creates really fertile ground for new ideas, but, well, it also plants the seeds for a pretty big dilemma.
And that boom leads us right to the central problem the speaker was trying to tackle. With so many choices out there, a real crisis of authenticity started to emerge. How do you know who to trust?
The speaker argues that, the sketchy actions of a few bad apples were making everyone look bad. He paints this picture of a landscape where some groups were involved in, as he put it, disgraceful activities, which made ordinary people pretty cynical about religion as a whole. It became really hard to see the forest for the trees.
And what a forest it was. I mean, get this. The speaker claims there were nearly 200,000, that's 200,000 different religious organizations in Japan at the time. And every single one of them was competing, and every one of them was saying, "We're the best, we have the real truth." You can just imagine the noise and confusion for anyone who is genuinely searching.
So this right here, this is the question at the absolute heart of this whole thing. If every group out there is claiming to be the one true path, but there's no common ruler to measure them against, how is an average person supposed to sort through it all? How do you separate the real signal from all of that static?
Well, in response to that exact question, to that chaos, the speaker proposed a solution, a clear three-part standard that anyone could use to judge for themselves.
Now, before we get to the test itself, we need to know what we're looking for. The speaker uses this term, shoho. He defines it as the true law or the true teachings. Basically, a truth that he says comes directly from a divine source, like from God or from Buddhas. That's the goal.
And here's the main idea in a nutshell. The speaker asserts that any teaching that is genuinely shoho, that is, truly authentic, will always have three specific, verifiable proofs with it. It's not enough to just say your teachings come from a divine place. You gotta have the receipts to back it up.
Okay, so here they are, the three proofs, or sansho. He says they are monsho, risho, and gensho. So first, you've got monsho, which is the literary proof. This means there has to be a solid foundation of written teachings, like scriptures, or a clear philosophy that you can actually read and study. Second is risho, the logical proof. The teaching has to make sense. It has to clearly explain the law of cause and effect in a way that's rational. And finally, there's gensho, or the actual proof. This is where the rubber meets the road. We're talking tangible results, spiritual phenomena, maybe even miracles that show a connection to something beyond the everyday. The speaker's point is that a truly authentic teaching isn't just one or two of these, it has to have all three. So now that the framework is laid out, the speaker immediately puts it to use, kind of like a litmus test to analyze the religious world around him.
Which of course leads to the next logical question, right? If a true teaching has all three of those proofs, what does a false one look like? Well, according to this framework, it's any teaching that's missing at least one of those crucial pieces.
And here's where he gets specific, identifying different types of groups based on what they lack. For example, he talks about phenomena-focused groups. They might have the gensho, the exciting spiritual events, but they're missing the teachings and the logic to explain what it all means. Then you've got ritual-based groups that are missing risho, the logic. They might use talismans or perform rituals, but can't explain the law of cause and effect behind them. He also calls out what he terms sweet bait groups for preaching feel-good messages that take away personal responsibility and power-focused groups that seem more interested in conflict and growth than in genuine love. From his perspective, every one of these is an incomplete puzzle.
But here's the thing. This framework isn't just some abstract tool for judging others. The speaker brings it all right back to the individual, arguing that the final and maybe the most important proof of all is what you experience yourself. This is where the theory has to become reality. The speaker argues that the true law has to actually work in your life. The ultimate proof comes when a person actually takes these teachings and lives by them day to day. Does it actually produce positive change? That, he says, is the real test.
And he describes this incredible before and after transformation. A person might start out just seeing the world as this dark, miserable place, feeling like everyone is out to get them, like they're just a victim of their circumstances. But then, after they start to practice the true law, their entire perception of reality can flip. Suddenly, the world starts to look bright and full of hope. They start to see the good in other people. They stop being a victim and become positive, proactive. And that internal change becomes its own undeniable proof.
This all leads to a really simple but powerful conclusion. The speaker puts it like this: when you know the light, you will clearly understand what is the opposite of light. The idea is that once you experience that positive transformation for yourself, that becomes your new standard. It's how you can judge everything else.
And that leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? The speaker offered his 3 proofs as a way to navigate the really complex world he was living in. But that challenge is universal. In a world that is just flooded with information and competing claims, whether they're spiritual, political, or scientific, what's your framework? What's the personal litmus test that you use to find your way?